So some Patriots fans are a bit concerned to hear that their quarterback Drake Maye surprisingly had to get some imaging done on his knee after practice today. So I've got to talk about that. The Saints really going through it from an injury standpoint themselves. Week 7 power rankings, the Lions checking in on an intriguing pass rusher, and more right after. Alright, first up, in some breaking news that has happened right before we were about to export this evening's video, I did want to talk really quickly here about Patriots quarterback Drake Maye. He surprisingly reportedly had an MRI after practice on his knee, and while some say, hey, it's not really a concern, per Ian Rappaport, among others. I'll share my screen so you can see here. NFL insiders, Ian Rappaport, Mike Garafolo, Tom Pelissero, they all said, no great concern regarding his knee, right? Well then, Ben Volin, who is the senior NFL writer at the Boston Globe, said this after sharing the injury report. There's a lot of names on here, but what I do want to get to is what he said. He said, I'm told Drake Maye went in for an MRI after practice today. Something to watch this week. Well, that leads some people to believe that since he was a full participant at today's practice, then had an MRI, he must have done something at today's practice, not 3 days ago during the game. There are some people in the comments, though, that are saying, hey, you're not a credible source. Ben Volin, senior NFL writer at the Boston Globe, seems credible enough to me to bring it up in this video. But yeah, some are saying, hey, we want to wait for more reports to come out. This is probably just precautionary, not a big deal at all. Others are a little bit more concerned, and just in general, as a Patriots fan, I would be somewhat concerned that your quarterback, who just started in his first game, is banged up with a knee. Full participant, yes, but was getting an MRI after practice. We'll see what the results show, and maybe we'll get more clarity tomorrow, but since that was some breaking news, I did want to bring that to your attention before exporting this video. Next up, we got to talk about some more injuries here. All right, first up, we've got some injury news and other player news to talk about before we get into these Week 7 power rankings. The first one, it's going to be a major bummer for the Giants. Left tackle Andrew Thomas is expected to be out for the remainder of the season after undergoing surgery this morning to repair a Liz Frank injury in his foot, which basically is a fracture in the middle part of his foot. And Thomas is one of the best left tackles in football, which is why it's such a major blow to a Giants team that has already been struggling. But just an example of how great he has been this season. He has the 9th highest pass block win rate among all offensive tackles since 2022, so it extends beyond this season, and he just signed a massive 5-year, $117 million extension with the team last summer. But sadly, the story of his career so far is that he has really struggled to stay healthy. He missed 7 games with a hamstring injury last year and has only played in 16 of the Giants' last 34. The Giants have done a decent job at keeping Daniel Jones upright this season. He's only taken 14 sacks in 6 games, but that task just became a lot harder after losing their best player along that O-line. So one player goes down for the season while another is expected to make his long-awaited return after a major injury last season. Yes, indeed, Browns running back Nick Chubb, who suffered that gruesome leg injury in Week 2 of last season and underwent 2 surgeries to repair both his MCL and ACL, is expected to play this week against the Bengals. He actually wrote a piece in the Players Tribune detailing what his recovery process has been like, as he hasn't played a game in 13 months. Adam Schefter shared a little snippet of what Chubb said here. Quote, I was meant for this city. I've tried to work my ass off every day to get us where we need to go, and even though we haven't gotten close, I feel like I have serious unfinished business. That's why it hurt me so bad to go down last season. We were just starting to cook. There's only one thing left to do now. I gotta pay you back. And the full piece is called Cleveland Got My Back and is linked in the description if you want to check out the full thing. It's not an ad or anything like that for him. But I think this is a really great story, and I'm definitely rooting for Nick Chubb, as he's been one of the best running backs in the game, really, since he entered the league back in 2018. I mean, the guy has rushed for over 6,000 yards in his first 5 seasons, which is actually insane. So yeah, I don't know how much of him we will actually see this Sunday. I'm sure they will ramp him up, and he's going to split carries with Jerome Ford, but I am happy for him and hope he is as close to his prime form as humanly possible. Speaking of running backs, one was on the move yesterday as the Texans traded Cam Akers and a conditional 7th round pick to the Minnesota Vikings for a conditional 2026 6th round pick. The Texans just got both Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce back from injury, so their running back room was looking a little crowded. Meanwhile, the Vikings were a bit thin as Aaron Jones has been dealing with a hip injury that he sustained in their Week 5 win over the Jets. It's kind of funny because this is the second time in 2 seasons that the Vikings have traded for Akers and for a very similar price. Last year, the Vikings sent a 2026 conditional 6th round pick to the Rams for Akers and a 2026 conditional 7th round pick. Akers then tore his Achilles in November, and the team elected not to bring him back this offseason as that was actually the second Achilles tear of his career. He tore it on his other foot back in 2021. He's averaged under 4 yards per carry as well for Houston this year on 40 carries, so nothing insane, but he's familiar with Kevin O'Connell's offense and at least gives them some added depth behind Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. Now, another player worth mentioning before I get into these power rankings is Saints wideout Rashid Shaheed. Their head coach Dennis Allen spoke with the media today and said Shaheed is going to be undergoing surgery on his meniscus, and per Adam Schefter, the surgery tomorrow will determine whether Rashid will be sidelined multiple weeks, might be placed on IR if it's 3 to 4 weeks, or for the rest of the season, depending on the severity of the meniscus injury. That is a big loss for the Saints either way, as he had 20 catches for 349 yards and 3 touchdowns over 5 games, and was leading the NFL with an average of 15.9 yards per punt return, even housing one of them. So the Saints are down their top receiver so far, and honestly, things are going from bad to worse for New Orleans right now. Shaheed could be placed on IR or miss the rest of the season. We just talked about that. But another top target, Chris Olave, is dealing with a concussion and won't play on Thursday night against the Broncos. Derek Carr, meanwhile, is still out another couple weeks with an oblique injury. And then tight end, quarterback, running back, hybrid Taysom Hill is also doubtful to play as he's recovering from those fractured ribs. And yeah, they play the Broncos on Thursday Night Football, and with Spencer Rattler throwing the ball to targets like Bub Means, Mason Tipton, and Cedric Wilson Jr., they are definitely in danger of losing 5 in a row and are one of the most banged up teams in the entire NFL right now. Not a great look for the Saints, who were kind of looking like they were trying to go all in this season. Started out very hot, winning 2, but have since plummeted all the way down, and it's been a tough thing to see, especially for Saints fans who have seemed to get disappointed almost year in and year out with false hope, especially since Breeze retired. All right, next up, let's get into these Week 7 power rankings. And full disclosure on these, I did not do power rankings for Week 6 last week because both the Chiefs and my editor Troy's favorite team and the Vikings were on bye week, so we really didn't care. Okay, that's not actually why, but we did miss last week. And so on these graphics, when you see the team's movement, whether up or down, just know it's from Week 5 and not Week 6, even though we did take both of the last 2 weeks into consideration as we made the new list today. So let's start at the bottom and work our way toward the top, beginning with the Cleveland Stains. They've lost 4 games in a row and just waved the white flag on their season by trading Amari Cooper to the Bills, even though Chubb is going to be a great addition to their offense. Don't get me wrong. Then there's the Panthers, who have lost 3 games in a row after Andy Dalton got them that win over the Raiders in Week 3, which feels like a very long time ago. The Jags finally got a win in Week 5, but then got destroyed by the Bears in London, as they are now 1-5. At 29 is the Titans, who actually have a good defense, but Will Levis leads all quarterbacks in turnovers and is almost solely responsible for their 1-4 start, or at least you could argue that he is the main reason why. I have the Patriots next at 28. They've lost 5 in a row, but Drake Maye showed some real flashes in his first game, and I think he makes them a better team than the previous 4 I just mentioned. And honestly, Drake Maye is only going to, in theory, improve as the season goes along. Then the Raiders are at 27. They're 2-4 and just traded Devontae Adams, which doesn't bode well for an offense that already sucks. The Rams are at 26. They're 1-4, but should get Cooper Kupp back from injury either this week or the next. I have Miami at 25. They're coming off their bye week at 2-3, with Mike McDaniel recently confirming Tua will return at some point this season. No idea when, but his return will definitely help what is currently the worst offense in the league, which is crazy considering the weapons they have on the offensive side of the ball. The Cardinals just got blown out for the second time in 3 weeks, and they're taking the number 24 spot here for me. At 23, I have the Giants, who actually have one of the best defenses in the league, but the offense is 29th in scoring, thanks in part to Danny Dimes and Malik Neighbors missing time with that concussion. Then the Saints have plummeted down the list after losing 4 straight, and now Derek Carr, among others that I talked about earlier, is out for a few weeks with an oblique injury. So yeah, they fell and have continued to fall down the list on these power rankings. The Jets have lost 3 straight, losing by a combined 7 points in those games, but just traded for Devontae Adams, which should be a huge shot in the arm for the offense. The Broncos defense has covered a multitude of Bo Nix's sins and is the biggest reason why they're sitting at 500 through 6 weeks. The Colts bounced back and beat the Titans this week, and I don't know if this is good or bad for them, but Anthony Richardson has a shot to make his return week 7. The Cowboys are at 18 after getting embarrassed at home by the Lions. They're now giving up the 30th most points per game, and the offense doesn't really look all that better. The Seahawks are next, but they have been free-falling, losing 3 games in a row, dropping to 3-3 on the season and number 17 on the power rankings. The Chargers just beat the Broncos and currently have the top-ranked defense in the league, so I'm going to have them up there, yes, even above the Cowboys at 16. Then I have the Bengals next, who moved to 2-4 after beating the Giants. They have a top 10 offense, and I'm definitely expecting them to finish the season with a winning record. At least I would seriously think so, if they can figure it out on the defensive side of the ball. The Bears are coming off 3 wins in a row, and they haven't beat the best teams in the world, but Caleb Williams is looking better and better each week. Plus, the defense is legit, so they moved all the way up to 14 for me. The Eagles are next up, and you could honestly argue that this is too high for them despite being 3-2. Nick Sirianni is a buffoon, and their offense hasn't scored a single first quarter point all season. But there they are. Meanwhile, the 49ers are fresh off a big divisional win over Seattle, moving to 3-3, and CMC is maybe coming back soon-ish, which will certainly help them in the long run. The Steelers blew out the Raiders after dropping 2 straight, but Russell Wilson is expected to start this Sunday despite Justin Fields playing well and leading them to a 4-2 record. Regardless of who's at quarterback, their defense is unreal and keeps them in just about every single game. Now, we got the top 10, so let's get into it. I have the Falcons here at 10 after winning 3 straight games, all against division opponents. The Commanders are at 9 with their 4-game win streak ending after they lost in a very close game to the Ravens. It was a banger of a game, but the Commanders are still hot, in my opinion. They have the second-ranked offense, and Jaden Daniels is freaking legit. The Bucs have scored 30 or more points in their last 3 games, including a 50-burger against the Saints as they move to 4-2 and number 8 on this list. The Packers are at 7. Their offense has been humming with Jordan Love back at QB, and they have a top 10 defense to go along with it. The Bills barely beat the Jets after dropping 2 straight, but the newly traded for Amari Cooper should be a massive boost for their offense that was already putting up the 7th most points per game. I have the Texans kicking off the top 5 after winning their 3rd straight game and moving to 5-1. Nico Collins is on IR, but they're still stacked at receiver, and Joe Mixon looked phenomenal in his first game back from injury. The Ravens are next at number 4, and boy, are they rolling right now, winning 4 straight after starting out 0-2. And the duo of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry is looking pretty unstoppable at the moment. The Lions are at number 3. They've scored over 40 points in back-to-back games and now have the top-ranked offense in the league as they sit at 4-1. Losing Aiden Hutchinson for the year was definitely a massive blow, but this team is still a Super Bowl contender in spite of that, and they have recently reportedly inquired about a pass rusher to maybe bring in some additional help along the D-line. But before I get to that, let's finish up these rankings with the top 2 spots. At number 2, I still have the 5-0 Vikings, who are taking on the previously mentioned Lions this week in a huge game for both teams. They have a top 5 offense, top 5 defense, and just traded for Cam Akers to give them a little more depth in the backfield as Aaron Jones is nursing a hip injury. Then at number 1, you could debate it that it's the Vikings, but I'm still going to keep the Chiefs at that number 1 spot. They are 5-0, like the Vikings, yes, but they started out on the power rankings at the number 1 spot, and until they lose, it's hard for me to move them down from this list. After all, they are the reigning back-to-back Super Bowl champs. Plus, the defense is playing lights out. They have arguably the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, Coach Spags, and offensive play caller, Andy Reid, and they could be making a move for a receiver here soon before the trade deadline after losing Rashid Rice for the rest of the season. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts on these rankings and where these teams stand heading into Week 7. All right, from here, let's talk just a bit more about the Lions inquiring about potentially acquiring Haason Reddick from the Jets. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reported today that the Lions have checked in with the Jets on the Haason Reddick situation. He says it could just be them doing their due diligence, but the Lions might make the most sense out of anyone in the NFL in terms of teams who should be looking to trade for him. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson is out for the rest of the season, and while they probably can't replace his production, he leads the NFL in sacks and is the highest graded edge rusher according to PFF. Haason Reddick has had 4 consecutive seasons with 11 or more sacks, not including this year, obviously, because he's been holding out after wanting a new contract from New York and not getting it. Aside from Aiden Hutchinson, the Lions don't really have any other high-end edge rushers on their roster, no disrespect to them, but after him, their next 2 sack leaders are Aleem McNeil, who just got a new extension today, by the way. You can see the details on there. Congrats to him. And then Levi Onwuzurike, he has 3 sacks, as does McNeil, but they're interior defensive linemen. So you definitely need help on the edge. Only 2 other edge rushers aside from Aiden Hutchinson have recorded a sack this year, and one of them is Marcus Davenport, who is also out for the year. So yeah, there is certainly a need there, and we know he's available because the Jets just granted him permission to seek a trade earlier this week. However, there's a couple things that could prevent a potential trade from happening. The reason that Haason Reddick has been holding out is because he wants a new contract from the Jets, reportedly to make him one of the highest paid pass rushers in the NFL. Maybe his mind could change, but that's at least what he has been wanting. The Jets are idiots, though, because they traded for him knowing he wanted a new contract and then proceeded not to give him one. Anyway, Detroit would likely have to fork over a new contract, and considering they just paid Aleem McNeil $97 million with $55 guaranteed over 4 years, and then will eventually need to pay Aiden Hutchinson top of the market money, that's a no-brainer move to get Hutchinson locked up forever. I'm not sure they want to invest that much more into their D-line by going to get Reddick if he's unwilling to play unless offered a top-of-the-market deal. Another thing that could hold off a potential deal is that the 3rd-round pick that the Jets traded for to the Eagles for Haason Reddick becomes a 2nd-round pick if they trade him to an NFC team. So the Jets would obviously rather move him to an AFC team if possible, especially since they just gave up a 3rd-round pick for Davante Adams. But who knows? Maybe the Lions are desperate enough since they have a real shot at a Super Bowl this year and they blow New York away with an offer that makes the 3rd-rounder turning into a 2nd worth it. Then they pay Reddick and decide to just deal with the cap later. They have cap space, I think like $28 or so million available, so it could happen. But what do you guys think? Should the Lions do all they can to trade for Haason Reddick, or is there another player they should target instead? Let me know what you think either way in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.